of the earth, if the people are exactly in line with God consciousness and are not miscreants, such a burden on the earth is a source of pleasure for her. So from now, the purport changes a little mood from after here. So I'll just say a little comment. So the summary is that Prabhupada is saying there's an adequate arrangement for all the living beings on this planet for food supplies. Like very often he says ants get their food, like a little grain of sugar, and elephants get tons and tons of food every day in the jungles. The Lord is providing for everybody, so there's no question of increased population causing a burden on the resources of the planet. And I was just listening to a small short yesterday of Srila Prabhupada in which he was talking about bread. How people are always like, give me our daily bread, give us our daily bread. And he says, even they go to church and say, give me my daily bread. So what is this bread consciousness? And so because Krishna is the Lord and Master, he will give enough for everyone, so we don't have to pray for that. Okay, moving along with the purport, there are two kinds of burdens. There is the burden of the beast and the burden of love. The burden of the beast is unbearable, but the burden of love is a source of pleasure. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the burden of love very practically. He says that the burden of the husband on the young wife, the burden of the child on the lap of the mother, and the burden of wealth on the businessman, although actually burdens from the viewpoint of heaviness, are sources of pleasure. And in the absence of such burdensome objects, one may feel the burden of separation, which is heavier to bear than the actual burden of love. So the two burdens are burden of the, what's the first word? Peace. Another one is burden of love. So they are very, very, very significant. I remember hearing a class from my spiritual master, His Holiness Rumapa Swami, many, many years ago, maybe 25 years ago, on this, must have been on this verse, because I remember the burden of the beast and burden of love. So it's very, very special. So when Lord Krishna referred to the burden of the Yadu dynasty on the earth, he referred to something different than the burden of the beast. The large numbers of family members born of Lord Krishna counted to some millions and were certainly a great increase in the population of the earth. But because all of them were expansions of the Lord himself, by his transcendental plenary expansions, they were a source of great pleasure for the earth. When the Lord referred to them in connection with the burden on the earth, he had in mind their imminent disappearance from the earth. All the members of the family of Lord Krishna were incarnations of different demigods, and they were to disappear from the surface of the earth along with the Lord. When he referred to the unbearable heaviness on the earth in connection with the Yadu dynasty, he was referring to the burden of their separation. The Jiva Goswami confirms this inference. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jana Shilakaya Chakshurumnitam Vina Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha Ukam Karoti Vachanam Pangod Nagahati Guru Yat Kripasam Shri Guru Namaha. The abatement of the earth's great burden, 18 Akshauhinis, has now been effected with the help of Drona, Bhishma, Arjuna and Bhima. But what is this? There is still the strength of the Yadu dynasty born of myself, which may be a more unbearable burden. So this is actually the continuation of the conversation between Uddhava and Vidura. And so the first point I would like to comment upon is Akshauhini, which is a collection of soldiers and charioteers and elephants. And so it's described that 18 Akshauhinis were actually involved in the battlefield of Kshetra. And just to do the numbers, actually the ratio, this is from Mahabharata Adi Parva, the ratio in an Akshauhini, there are 1-to-1 ratio of elephants and chariots, 3 parts cavalry, which is horsemen, and 5 infantry soldiers. So 1-to-1 to 3-to-5. And in total, in each Akshauhini, there are how many? There is a number. I thought I put the number now. But in total, there were 4 million warriors. in this 18 Akshahuinis in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. 21,000 chariots, 21,000 elephants, 65,000 horses, and 109,000 infantry elephants. So in total, it's mentioned in the Mahabharata, 39, so it's in total for 3.9 million, 3.933660. So I'm putting it to 4 million soldiers, just warriors, just in these 18 Akshahuinis. And out of which 7 belong to the Pandava army and 11 were from the Kuru army. And this fact, which I didn't know until I started preparing for this class, was that out of the 11 Akshahuinis which fought for the Kauravas, only 1 belonged to Krishna's army. As you may remember that Duryodhana wanted Krishna's army, not Krishna himself. And so Krishna gave him 1 Akshahuini, which were led by Kritavarma, and they belonged to the Yadavas, of course, the Andakas, Vrishnis, Kukuras, Bhojas, and the Shankars. So, only 1 Akshahuini. So, Prabhupada mentioned in the purport about, Prabhuji had some question about the Akshahuinis?
Yeah, I was thinking if 500 million people died in the war, it can be 4 million armies. You know, because half of people died in the war. 500 million.
Well, I'm just quoting from Mahabharata.
400 million.
I'm sorry.
It's
possible that my source is wrong.
Yeah, and Srila Prabhupada actually said 600 million one time in a lecture. So.
Yeah, 600 million has happened.
Alright. So.
There's a little over that.
Off by a few hundreds. So, moving along to Dharma Grani, Prabhupada says the earth becomes overburdened due to Dharma Grani, not overburdened due to population increase. And the very famous verse of Bhagavad Gita 4:7, Tadayada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamiham. So wherever there is a decline in religious practice, Krishna says, and a predominant rise of irreligion, I descend myself. So, dharmasya glani, because Krishna is actually dharmatu sakshat bhagavad pranitam, he is actually making the principles of dharma. So, the Vedic principles are actually in the purport. Prabhupada says the Vedic principles push one towards complete surrender to Krishna, and whenever such principles are disturbed by the demoniac people, the Lord appears. And so in today's purport, Srila Prabhupada says the material creation is meant for fulfilling the desires of the Lord, and his desire is that we all go back to him, and he makes arrangements that we can actually improve our condition, which means, raise our consciousness so we can enter the spiritual world. And actually another note about Akshahuini is that Jarasandha was defeated by Krishna 17 times. And I came across this statistics was that Jarasandha, every time he fought Krishna, he brought 1 Akshahuini. But the 18th time when he came, he brought 23 Akshahuinis, even larger than the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So he was actually serving the Lord in his mission of Dharmasya Glani. And so in total, 17 plus 23 is 40 Akshahuinis. Just Jarasandha was helping Krishna in getting rid of all of the irreligious people. So for the rest of this class, I'm going to use as a reference Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 11, Chapter 1, which is actually labeled The Curse Upon the Yadu Dynasty. So in this chapter, 11.1.2, which will come up on the board, but I'm going to read this one text first. Because the sons of Pandu were enraged. So it starts out by how the battlefield of Kurukshetra happened, and then Krishna thinking about what we just taught today, in our verse today. Because the sons of Pandu were enraged by the numerous offenses of their enemies, such as duplicitous gambling, verbal insults, the seizing of Draupadi's hair, and many other cruel transgressions, the Supreme Lord engaged those Pandavas as the immediate cause to execute his will. On the pretext of the battle of Kurukshetra, Lord Krishna arranged for all of the kings who were burning the earth to assemble with their armies on opposite sides of the battlefield, and when the Lord killed them, through the agency of war, the earth was relieved of its burden. I heard in a class some time ago that the word Krishna relieving the burden has been mentioned like 20 times, at least in the Bhagavatam. So in the previous verse, which was yesterday's verse 3:13, we see that Duryodhana has been killed, and the Lord is actually not very happy. The Lord was not happy to see the scene. And Uddhava, as he's talking to Vidura, he can understand the mind of Krishna, that Krishna is feeling great unhappiness because he's seeing that his mission is coming to an end, because he has gotten rid of the Dharmasya Glani, all the religious people, as much as possible. And he was actually feeling unhappiness because of the impending separation from the Yadus. And that is the burden which he mentions in the next verse, which is the burden of love. And I will also reference to differentiate this burden of love from the burden of beast. In the 8th canto, when Bali Maharaj is talking to his spiritual master Shukracharya, who is prohibiting him from giving 3 feet of land to Vamana Dev, he says this verse, Nahi asatyat paro dharmo iti hovacha bhurayam sarvam shodhumalam manye lika param naram riti lika param naram. So here he says in 8:24, Canto 8, chapter 20, verse 4, there is nothing more sinful than untruthfulness. Because of this, Mother Earth once said, I can bear any heavy thing except a person who's a liar. So like Prabhupada says in today's purport as well, there are many great mountains and oceans. The earth is ready to bear the burden of those very, very heavy mountains and earth and the water. Actually, water is more heavier, and 75% of this world is water, and Mother Earth has no difficulty carrying them. But she feels very much overburdened, Prabhupada says in the purport, when she carries even one person who is a liar. And in Kali Yuga, it's very common for people to lie. So no one is free from the sinful reaction of speaking lies. And under the circumstances, Prabhupada says, one can just imagine how this has overburdened the earth and indeed the entire universe. So continuing with the Canto 11, chapter 1 verses, the text 3 says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead used the Yadu dynasty, which was protected by his own arms, to eliminate the kings who with their armies had been the burden of this earth. Then the unfathomable Lord thought to himself, although some may say that the earth's burden is now gone, in my opinion, it's not yet gone, because there still remains the Yadava dynasty whose strength is unbearable for the earth. So this is like the sister verse of today's verse, right? So he's contemplating the strength of his sons, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Samba, which are still remaining on the planet. And since he's leaving, he is thinking about it. And in the purport, actually, several acharyas' opinion of this point is presented as to the reasons for disappearance of the Yadus. The first one we're going to talk about is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's comment on this, the title for which would be Familiarity Beats Content. That although many demigods had taken birth in the Yadu dynasty to assist the Lord, some members, Bhaktisiddhanta comments, they had become inimical towards Krishna. So because of their mundane vision, they considered themselves to be on the same platform as Krishna, and they thought we have inconceivable strength because, we are in Krishna's dynasty. So Lord Krishna detected that because of their intimate association, they've actually become indifferent to my will. So he felt that they could maybe act freely once he left the planet, and if they acted freely, they would surely cause great misfortune for the world. And they would constitute a great burden, and consequently it was necessary for Krishna to remove them from the earth. So even though we heard about burden of love, different acharyas have presented different ideas as to what reasons could there be for the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty. And so he felt he has to consider the need to annihilate the indifferent, contemptuous members of the Yadu family. Jiva Goswami says they are eternal associates of the Lord. So the other reason is given is that the Lord's associates are not ordinary persons, and they cannot bear to separate themselves from the Lord. And since Krishna was leaving his earthly pastimes and he were going to leave, then the Yadus would become so disturbed in his absence that they might become very agitated and they might trample and destroy the earth. Because of their separation from Krishna and not being able to bear that separation, therefore Krishna arranged for the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty before his own disappearance. And then Jiva Goswami further says that the members of the Yadu dynasty, of course, are never to be considered irreligious, and it is actually meant for us to understand that conditioned souls, that the temporary nature of this world. They were very opulent, they had all kinds of opulences, like, not on the level of Krishna, but almost as good as Krishna, of beauty, strength, knowledge, fame, etc. And what Jiva Goswami says, they were endowed with inconceivable opulences. Therefore, when we see how a fratricidal war suddenly deprived the members of the Yadu dynasty of all of their earthly possessions and even their lives, we can understand that there is no permanent position within this material world. And he actually says that the Yadus were immediately transferred to another planet where the Lord was appearing. So the entire situation was actually arranged by the Lord to teach a lesson to the conditioned souls that this is very temporary. All of our opulences, all of whatever we may have at this point, or whatever we are thinking of accumulating as time goes on, it's very temporary. And so we should not be attached to it. The Yadus, however, are fighting, when they even fought amongst themselves, they were fighting for Krishna's pleasure, and they were totally aligned to his will. And Srila Jiva Goswami actually cites, in his commentary, he cites many verses as to how the Yadus are actually very, very Krishna conscious, aligned to Krishna's will. He says that in those verses he quotes how the Yadus were always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. It is said that in sleeping, sitting, walking and sleeping, they were unable to remember their own selves because they were simply thinking of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada has commented on this point as well, on the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty in Canto 1, Chapter 15, verse 33. The setting of the sun does not mean the end of the sun. It means that the sun is out of our sight. Similarly, the end of the mission of the Lord on a particular planet or universe only means that he is out of our sight. The end of the Yadu dynasty also does not mean that it is annihilated. It disappears along with the Lord out of our sight. So going on to text 4, Lord Krishna thought, no outside force could ever bring about the defeat of this family, the Yadu dynasty, whose members have always been fully surrendered to me and are unrestricted in their opulence. But if I inspire a quarrel within the dynasty, that quarrel will just act like a fire created from the friction of bamboo in a grove, and then I shall achieve my real purpose and return to my eternal abode. So in the purport, the question which is being asked is, one might ask, why Lord Krishna did not arrange for them to be killed by others? And the answer is given that the Yadu dynasty was very, very powerful. Nobody was capable, even in the universe, nobody in the universe was capable of killing them, not even the demigods. And so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that no one was even capable of insulting the Yadus, what to talk of defeating them or killing them. And so Krishna actually says, Mat sam ashrasya. The Yadu dynasty members had fully taken shelter of Krishna, so they were always under the personal protection of the Lord. And so Krishna arranged this battle, this fight amongst themselves so that they could be annihilated, they could be taken away from the planet. In contrast, does anybody know how the Brajvasis left this planet? If anybody knows, would they like to share how the Brajvasis went? Yes, Prabhuji, can you give him the microphone? Vikram Prabhu, thank you. Because there's total contrast then as to how the
right?
Pardon me?
The Brajvasis.
The Brajvasis.
The gopis.
Okay, you can tell about the gopis.
I know I read something that they left, in separation. I mean, lamented and stuff so much, and then they left their bodies. But
Well, I have something else. If anybody else knows how the Vrajvasis left the planet. Okay, so this is what I had. I'm sorry?
The gopis?
All of the Vrajvasis, because they were all in separation with Krishna, they're still in Vrindavan.
Did the gopis drown themselves?
Did they drown themselves? I'm not sure of that. What I understood from one of the classes I was hearing is that Krishna actually took them personally back to Godhead, and he actually showed them Goloka Vrindavan, and he was in his two-armed form. Krishna actually took them personally, and for the Yadus, of course, he has the four-armed form, and he actually incited this fratricidal war. And in the purport of this same verse, in which we are talking about the Yadus being totally surrendered, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has said that ordinary people, another reason, that ordinary people hearing of the adventures of the Yadu family might think that the heroes of the Yadu dynasty are as worshipable as Krishna. So Krishna wanted to remove them from the planet because people might start thinking, oh, they're from the family of Krishna, they are very, very elevated, so we should start worshipping them. In other words, people polluted by Mayavad philosophy might see these Yadus on the same level as Krishna. So to establish that even the most powerful living entity can never equal or surpass the Lord, Krishna arranged for the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. And Bhaktisiddhanta has drawn a parallel in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, and I will come to it in a moment. So the curse on the Yadus was Krishna's will. He did not, and the thing is, even though the curse happened by very, very elevated devotees. Narada was present in that assembly where the curse was done on the Yadus. And Krishna could have actually counteracted it, but we see that Krishna did not do that, even though he was forcefully able to, and we know the reasons why, which we've already discussed. And we know that Krishna, there's another, you can say, kind of a contrast. Krishna intervened to save Maharaj Parikshit when he was in the womb from Ashwatthama's weapon, but he did not interfere with the curse which came upon Maharaj Parikshit later on when he was going to be dying within 7 days. So the Acharyas have offered this explanation that if Maharaj Parikshit would be present in Kali Yuga, and because he was such a great devotee of the Lord, that he would not let Kali flourish. And Kali would actually, this Kali Yuga will be as good as Satyuga. So that's why Maharaj Parikshit had to leave, because so that Kali Yuga can go on, and then ultimately Kalki will come, Lord Kalki will come and annihilate all of the irreligious people. Another thing which I thought I would comment upon was what we can learn from the curse by the Brahmanas upon the Yadus, that we should never envy the devotees and ridicule the devotees, that ridicule directed towards respectable persons actually vanquish all our good qualities. So as practicing bhaktas, we can be very, very careful not to displease the Vaishnavas, not to displease the Brahmanas, not to tease them or mock them, because the Lord is not happy. The Lord actually becomes very ill-disposed, even to his own relatives who are making fun or displaying envy towards his own devotees. So that's how we see Krishna is equal to everyone. Whether they are his devotees, whether they are demons, he will be equal, because he does not want his devotees to be offended against or bad behavior, displeasing of the Vaishnavas. And two examples which I came across, which I can kind of mention, was of the offenses committed by King Rahuguna, who was actually headed towards Kapilashram on his palanquin, and then he comes across Bharat, who actually picks up the palaki, picks up the palanquin, and he, most of us know the story, that he was actually criticizing Bharat, who was a great devotee, and he had a momentary lapse of judgment. So this would be called an offense of commission. And the other offense we can mention is King Indradyumna, who was actually meditating in a forest, and he had a lapse in dealing with Agastya Muni, who came into his ashram, and he did not offer his pranams, and he was just quietly, silently sitting, and Agastya Muni actually cursed him to become an elephant. So we have to be very careful in dealing